For our news segment, for a story that I wrote, we have a big ruling out of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. We have officially another bump stock ruling where a judge found that the ATF doesn't have the authority to impose that ban. If, listeners will remember, President Trump instituted this ban in the aftermath of the Las Vegas shooting in 2017. The ban went into effect in 2018, and it essentially changed the way the ATF classifies bump stocks, where previously they had said that they're A-OK, and now they declare them machine guns, essentially. So machine guns, for those who don't know, are federally prohibited, especially those manufactured after 1986. And so folks that have these...
they have to be registered for you to be able to possess them.
Right.
And that was the big issue in that case, because they didn't. This is one area where the bump stock ban is a little bit different from the more recent executive orders or rule changes that the Biden administration has put in place, which the bump stock ban did not allow you to register the bump stocks, even if you wanted to. So they basically all became illegal overnight to possess for anyone who had them. It didn't, technically they were sort of backdated NFA items by the way this rule was put into place.
Right. Yeah. It was either confiscation, destroy them, or face possible 10-year jail sentence. And so this is what this case happened. This gentleman was a Kentucky man who owned bump stocks prior to the ban, had to get rid of them, obviously, when the ban was handed down, and he sued. Just to show you how long this litigation takes, this was back in 2019 when he first sued, and we finally have a Court of Appeals ruling in 2023. But basically, the judge in this case, a little bit different than the Fifth Circuit ruling that we covered earlier this year, where they also struck down the bump stock ban. In this case, the judge made no affirmative ruling one way or the other whether or not a bump stock can be classified as a machine gun. He essentially said reasonable minds can differ, but because it's so unclear whether or not it actually is a machine gun, he followed what's called the rule of lenity, which says whenever there's ambiguity in a criminal law, then the defendant, tie goes to the runner. Essentially, the defendant comes out on top, and that's how this one was decided.
Yeah. There was a 3-judge panel, and it was a unanimous ruling, right? Yep,
3-0. Although I would say the concurrence wanted to go a little bit further than the other judges were willing to go. He was more akin with the Fifth Circuit, where he said, I think it's pretty clear that this doesn't meet the textual definition of a machine gun. But either way, it's the same outcome.
Right, because the core problem with the ATF's rule is that there's a pretty specific definition of machine gun in federal law, which is that any firearm that fires more than one round per trigger press is a machine gun. Is using automatic fire, right? So if you pull the trigger once and you get multiple rounds, it doesn't matter if it's 3 rounds or 2 rounds, burst fire or fully automatic or whatever, as long as that trigger depression fires more than 1 round, then it's considered automatic fire. And then obviously semi-automatic is each time you pull the trigger, you get 1 round. And so you have to pull the trigger every time you want to fire a round. And the issue is that bump stocks, and this one is just a fact, it's really not even a matter of opinion. Bump stocks do not cause the firearm to fire more than 1 round per trigger pull. All it does is facilitate a style of shooting. You can bump fire without a bump stock, right? It's essentially just using the recoil of the gun to reset the trigger much more quickly than you could by physically squeezing your trigger and letting go. So a bump stock just allows you to depress the trigger much faster than you otherwise would be able to, but you're still having to pull the trigger or depress the trigger or have a function of the trigger every time you fire a round. And that's sort of the big problem with the ATF's redefinition of these devices from literally just stocks that aren't regulated at all. They're not firearms. It's literally just a piece of plastic. It's a stock. And they moved that to a machine gun.
Right.
And the part itself is a machine gun. And so, that's the core of this. And it's interesting in this case, they just didn't want to, I guess the 2 of the 3 judges didn't want to make a determination about the facts of the matter, because there have been other courts that have determined it is a machine gun and that the regulation is fine. But it still came down to what was at the core of the Fifth Circuit case too, which was the rule of lenity, right? The ATF previously said this, now they're saying this, and it's a totally different thing. And it's the law itself is not necessarily obviously on the side of the new rule that the ATF has put down. And so because even the ATF can't figure out whether this thing's a machine gun, people shouldn't be prosecuted under the understanding that it is a machine gun, because how could they know if the ATF doesn't even know? That's sort of the base. Put it in simpler terms, that's what they're ruling. And the issue with that, or the implication for that beyond the bump stock rule, is that these other recent rules may suffer from this same defect, right? The bump stock ban kind of laid the groundwork for what President Biden has done with the ghost gun ban, so-called ghost gun ban, right? And the ban on pistol braces, or pistol braced guns, at least. And I think those rules are just as susceptible to this exact kind of reasoning as the bump stock ban is.
Right.
And that's going to be the real implications.
I was to say we have an actual history of the ATF issuing determination letters saying, these are fine. You're not in violation of any laws if you want to possess these and use these. And then something happens, some public event happens, the president changes, and all of a sudden, actually, they're NFA items, and you could go to jail. So I agree that the logic is
federal jail for 10 years.
That's right, up to 10 years in federal prison. Yeah, it's not it's not a slap on the wrist by any means. And it's also just an interesting thing to note with the bump stock ban is now we have 2 federal appeals courts coming down and saying that this ban doesn't fly. But, a couple of years back, we had a string of at least 3 other federal appeals courts that said that it was fine. And you have to wonder now, does the Supreme Court look at the situation and say, well, it's untenable to have half the country say it's one way and half the country say it's the other way? And you have to wonder, is this the next big case they might take? And, the Biden administration has already appealed that Fifth Circuit ruling that we talked about. So it could very well be the next gun case, even though it's not a Second Amendment case. It's more of an administrative law case, but it could be the next gun case.
That is one of the fascinating things about this whole ordeal as well, because these rulings don't deal with the Second Amendment. They don't even deal with the recent EPA ruling about the limits of agency power. Those really weren't arguments at issue in these cases, and you still have the bump stock ban losing. So it's fascinating. But I think you're right about that. Circuit split could absolutely lead to a Supreme Court case in the near future. We just talked with Dave Koppel about some of the other potential, front of the line cases for the Supreme Court to take on guns. This should probably be in that conversation as well, somewhere in there, because you're already at the circuit level for these cases. You're already at the appeals court level. This is, I think, the Fifth Circuit bump stock case. Has that gone to the full court yet? I can't recall.
Yeah, that one was an en banc decision. The Sixth Circuit one is not, but the Fifth Circuit one was.
The Sixth Circuit's a panel, but the Fifth Circuit was en banc. And if DOJ is appealing that, the next stop is the Supreme Court. So this could be the next one of the next ones. It could be the next one. We don't even know. This is another issue where federal law is implicated and struck down in these cases, sort of. I mean, it's rulemaking, but DOJ wants the court to take that, and they usually get preference in the the court's going to hear the government's